So we are talking Demons 2, once again directed by Lamberto Bava, who also co-wrote this along with Dario Argento, who is the producer of this movie, just like the first. So this is a continuation from the original movie. It takes place sometime after that film, which is referenced, and we learn that the demon outbreak from the first movie was contained in a area which has been walled off and called the Forbidden Zone. So this movie, we have a high-rise apartment that's once again infected by this kind of demon outbreak, and a dwindling number of survivors are obviously kind of fighting for their survival. We'll touch on some story elements again in just a little bit. So let's talk about what works in this movie. So much of the positives and negatives are going to be very similar to the first movie, to be honest. So, but just to give you a kind of a little bit more context, they've obviously looked at the success of the original Demons and then just tweaked what worked in that film and changed it, like a few things, like the setting, for example. Rather than a movie theatre, it's now in a high-rise apartment, just to give it some type of difference. I do think the once again we have a movie within a movie, and it's actually pretty interesting. So we see in this film, the movie within a movie, that we have a group of people going into the now Forbidden Zone to try and get souvenirs and things from the demons. And this is ultimately the catalyst which causes the demons to escape again. But there is some problems with that. But the actual concept of these kind of, you know, individuals going into this demonic kind of graveyard now is a pretty fun one. And I have to be honest with you, I would have thought that might have been a more interesting film, because it would be different but still connected to the first. The film that we've got, we'll talk about again in some story elements in just a little bit. But at least the initial, the footage involving these kind of individuals breaking into this kind of Forbidden Zone and finding like demon corpses and things like that, I think it all looks great. You know, this kind of destroyed, desolated kind of environment and stuff looks great. And once again, these demons, they're all gooey and gory and everything, look horrible. But the makeup is very, very good. You know, even now I think it still sort of stands up. And they do try to have a little variety of demons in this one. We've got a demon dog. We've got a demon child. I mean, they kind of look a little goofy, particularly the dog, but at least they're trying to have variations now of the demons. We get a kind of, I guess, a purebred demon as well, which looks like something from the Ghoulies. But again, I don't think it's entirely successful, and we'll talk about it. But again, we're trying to plus the original film. There are some fun characters in this, albeit they're not particularly developed. Bobby Rhodes, who was actually in the first movie, but he plays a different character in this film, is fun as this kind of like personal instructor who is kind of like leads the kind of the resistance, and all these kind of like gym bros are all there with their kind of like oiled up 80s flex on. It's pretty fun. And the movie is a little more comedic to a degree, and there are some sort of goofier elements here, which makes it not quite have as much bite, but maybe would be a bit more palatable if you are you're wanting a little bit more of a rounded movie in some ways, I suppose. And, you know, even though I think the setting is very similar, and we'll talk about that again, I think the idea of these people kind of trapped in this kind of like high-rise apartment, you know, is kind of quite fun, and it makes for some claustrophobic sequences and things like this, and, you know, who's at the door. So, yeah, there's some fun elements to this one. So, let's talk about what doesn't work. Okay. Now, The biggest critique, and let me just get this out of the way first, is that the movie is just the same film as the first one. The plot is so similar with only minor tweaks. I'm surprised how similar it is. It's a bunch of people trapped in a building and an ever-amassing army of demons attacking them. Even some of the elements within the story are the same. Now, one of the critiques I forgot to mention in my original Demons review is that there's we see footage of this gang of punks that are out driving around in the city in the first movie, and we have a gang of punks driving around the city in this one. And in neither film do they really have any impact on the actual story and seem completely superfluous. Even the finale of this movie works out the similar, where we have remaining survivors getting out through the roof. I mean, it's so similar. So that's probably the most obvious criticism, but let's have a look at a couple of other things. I think this film has even less characterization than the first, which was lacking. I think outside of maybe the Bobby Rhodes character, who isn't the main character, there's really no sense of who these protagonists are. Really very little kind of idea about anyone in this kind of high-rise apartment, to be honest. We have our kind of, I guess, our main two protagonists, but they don't really register as characters at all, if you, in my opinion. Even less than the first, which had its own problems of characterization. There are some goofier elements that I think don't work. The demon dog, the kind of like the imp sort of demon that pops out, looks like a kind of 2-foot frog. It looks, again, it looks a bit too comedic, I think, a little bit too, and it makes these kind of little cute sounds and things. It's like, it feels like it's trying to have more of a horror comedy tone, really, but again, it's sort of at odds with some of what else goes on in the movie. So there's that kind of goofier element. I think this movie makes less sense than the first movie. So let's talk about that initial setup. Now, the first film, we have a group of people that get, tempted to go to this movie theatre. There's a display in the foyer with a kind of like what we presume is an actual demonic artifact where someone sort of cuts their face on it. And that is the beginnings of this kind of demonic curse. This one, there's nothing like that. We have a television broadcast which is having some type of film, and I couldn't really understand what it was like. Was it meant to be live? Because it kind of switches back and forth between people watching it and kind of footage from it, and I was like, is this meant to be like actually people are doing it, but then who's actually filming it, because it's all edited and things? That didn't make sense. And I'm thinking, okay, well, if this is a pre-recorded film, I mean, you can get away with, putting on a film in a projector and then, inviting people to the cinema and then they're trapped watching it and that. But in this movie, it seems to be that it's being broadcast. I mean, that would be a lot more difficult to do. So are these like tech-savvy demons that are managing to do a pirate broadcast? And how is it that only the demons are coming out in this apartment building? Why isn't it on everywhere else? Or demons getting coming through the TV? This is what happens. Is that someone in the apartment building is watching this film and the demons end up coming through the TV, which is a cool visual, but it doesn't really make sense. I mean, there's no inciting incident where someone cuts themselves like the first movie that kind of starts the infection, and it doesn't really make any sense, I have to say. And now Italian cinema, maybe not the kind of the pinnacle of logical filmmaking in regards to story development and things, but I think the first one you could kind of just about get away with accepting some of the kind of, just because it was such a simple story. But this one, I think, even it is once again a simple story, but it still manages to make quite a convoluted setup to this film. And I've got to say as well, there's probably less dialogue in this movie than the first, particularly once the demons start kind of going loose. And it's just a lot of time is spent with just demons running around the building, people screaming and running away. And there's long segments with very little dialogue. And I have to be honest with you, I was beginning to become a little bored with this film. So it's a paler imitation from the first, which I think was an above average movie. I know I didn't score it mega high, but I do think it was an above average. This movie, I gotta say, I think it's below average. So I'm gonna give this one a 4 out of 10. I just don't think it's a particularly strong film. Props to the makeup, and there's some fun sequences, but I don't think it's a strong film. So there you go. 4 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What was your thoughts on Demons 2? I'd love to hear it. Leave me a comment. I look forward to seeing you next time.